In this second segment of the Introduction to American Media History, we're going to talk briefly about the printing press in early England. Because after all, the American press system has its roots in the English system. William Caxton was the first printer in England. He heard about Johannes Gutenberg's invention and went to Germany to learn as much as he could about it. When he returned, he set up the Caxton print shop and published such works as Chaucer, Malory, and over a few years, over 100 books, which for the time was enormous. Illiteracy was still very high, but it was recognized by Caxton and certainly by the authoritarian rulers in Europe that the masses now had a way of communicating as soon as they could learn to read. Therefore, the European authoritarian regimes, and by that I mean monarchs and the church were threatened anew. Censorship had a long tradition under the European monarchs. So, for example, in England, between the 11th and 15th century, thousands of heretics were burned for speaking and writing against the church. John Wycliffe, in the 11th century, I believe, or maybe it was the 14th, translated the Bible from Latin without permission. Because of that, he was burned and thrown in the Thames River. He was such a threat to the church. In 1275, the king established a law that any slander against the king and the realm was illegal because it could lead to subversion and destruction. And bear in mind that slander didn't really matter if it was true or not. You simply couldn't say it, anything that threatened the crown. And certainly the printing press compounded the monarch's fears. So in England, Henry VIII silenced the press after he overthrew the Catholic Church. You may remember that he wanted to divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and marry Anne Boleyn. The Pope refused to allow him to do that, and as a result, he separated England from the Catholic Church and established himself as the leader over the new Anglican Church. That meant that anybody who was Catholic up to that point, which of course was everyone, were in a lot of danger unless they immediately converted to the new religion in England. Henry prohibited any unofficial printing, meaning any printing that had not been approved by those he put in charge. He established 3 agencies to control printing. It was an elaborate system of what we call prior restraint. Prior restraint simply means that something can't be even printed. So there are ideas that aren't even allowed to be put into print. So these 3 systems were the Stationers' Company, and these were printers who were established and given authority by the king with the power to search and seize and destroy the presses of anyone who was considered to be heretical. He also had the Court of High Commission, and the court licensed printers. Printers were given licenses if they agreed only to publish things that were approved by the crown. And then the Court of the Star Chamber. This was the group that punished people who were accused of and found to be guilty of printing things that were considered to be unacceptable. You can imagine that this was quite a reign of terror, and it took a lot of courage for any printer to try to step outside these bounds. Henry's daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, were queens following his death. Bloody Mary was Catholic, and she tried to return Catholicism to the official English religion. Over 200 people were killed during her reign as she tried to reestablish Catholicism. She, of course, was very strict about controlling the press and only allowed things that supported Catholicism and her reign. Elizabeth, on the other hand, was a Protestant, and after her sister died, she became queen and was determined to make England Anglican again, that is Protestant. She as well kept a strict control on the press to ensure that no dissident publications were made. James I opposed what were being brought from Amsterdam, which were Corantos. These were English language news sheets. He was very concerned about anything being published that didn't have official approval by the monarch. And Charles I required licenses for all presses and books. So you can see by the time the American colonies were established in the 1600s, there was a long and well-established tradition of restraint on the press, not just after things were published, but even before things were published, printers and publishers could be in trouble. In the next segment, we're going to talk about men whose ideas challenged censorship and challenged the power of the monarchs to control printing and control ideas.